Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this blue-black reanimator deck, and in paper our commander would be Superior Spiderman. On Arena we get the reskin version Kavaero Mind-Bitten, a 4-mana 4/4, saying we may have Kavaero enter as a copy of any creature card in any graveyard, including the opponent's, except its name will still be Kavaero Mind-Bitten. It's still a 4/4 spider-human hero in addition to its other types, and then if we do, we have to exile the card we chose to copy. So Kavaero is essentially a reanimation spell that we have access to from the command zone, which is very convenient, so that way we can just tailor the deck to include lots of expensive creatures and then lots of discard outlets to get those creatures into the graveyard in the first place, setting up our commander beautifully, so on turn 4 we could already be getting back some of the biggest creatures in Magic. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories. We don't need a ton of ramp in this deck, since we'll be spending turns 2 and 3 discarding and drawing, as opposed to necessarily ramping. And then turn 4, we don't really need a ton of ramp to get there, so we can cast our commander and bring something back, but having a few mana artifacts, especially ones like Chrome Mox that can speed things up by a turn, can be worth it. Then we get to our interaction. As a blue-black deck, we get access to some of the most powerful counter spells in the format, as well as some very powerful and efficient removal spells, some of which also double up as discard outlets, which ties into our next category. Lots of ways to draw and to discard cards, or immediately, maybe with Buried Alive, put some of the most powerful creatures into our graveyard, setting up Kavaero on the following turn. And then the most exciting category are the reanimation targets. These are all huge creatures that we're hoping to discard and then bring back with Kavaero. Even as a 4/4, they will have an immediate impact and often take over a game. And then we do have some backup reanimation spells, maybe in the case that Kavaero gets countered, and these are also often a bit cheaper than 4 mana, so then we can maybe reanimate on turn 3 already. And then finally a few cantrips here. Ponder, also a recent addition to the format alongside Brainstorm, so those can also help assemble the right hand. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. I already mentioned Chrome Mox, so this can maybe speed things up by a whole turn. Same with Dark Ritual, which can maybe ramp out Kavaero ahead of schedule. Then we also have some ramp artifacts at 2 mana with the Terminus. Also a recent addition, can also maybe reanimate stuff once we harness it. And then we've got the Dimir Signet, the Blue-Black Talisman, and Arcane Signet, which can often immediately tap for mana. Then we move on to our interaction, where we have a cheap bounce spell into the Floodmaw, the most versatile one. We also have some counter spells. 3 Steps Ahead also doubles up as a discard outlet if we just want to cast it for 3 mana to draw 2 and then discard a card, but we can also maybe use it as a 3 mana counter, or maybe combine the 2 for 5 mana. There's Wash Away to cheaply counter opposing commanders. And then Mana Leak, also a recent addition to the format, just a classic blue counterspell, alongside the real classic counterspell, as well as the pretty busted Mana Drain, which can give us a bunch of free mana on the following turn. Then we have a few discard effects as well, at 1 mana with Thoughtseize and Duress. Thoughtseize in a pinch can also target ourselves to maybe discard an expensive creature, but usually is going to be targeting the opponent. Duress can maybe take away opposing counterspells or other relevant interaction. Then we've got Bone Shards, which as an additional cost can also discard a card from our hand to set up our graveyard, very similar to Bitter Triumph, which can also destroy creatures or planeswalkers at instant speed. I do have room for a little bit of graveyard hate with Cling to Dust in case we're up against other graveyard strategies. Can maybe exile a Strip Mine if the opponent tries to recur it out of their graveyard, and since we're often filling the graveyard, we can easily escape a Cling to Dust to get a bit of extra value. Then we also have Fatal Push as another very efficient removal spell, can easily enable Revolt with our fetch lands. And then Collective Brutality, kind of a split between a Duress effect and a removal spell, can also drain the opponent for 2 and can escalate multiple modes, again discarding cards as an additional cost. Then a Drown can be both a counterspell and a removal spell, and then Toxic Deluge, our sweeper of choice. Then we move on to our draw and discard effects with Chart a Course. Can also maybe just draw 2 if we attacked once we already reanimated our creatures. Ghostly Pilfer I enjoy, since it also draws off the opponent casting their commander, and we can discard cards at will. So I'm not running any of the creatures that require you to activate them to draw and discard, because then our opponent gets a chance to maybe remove them before we successfully manage to discard one of our finishers. Instead, Ghostly Pilfer can immediately discard something even in the face of removal, similar to Psychic Frog, which is also just a good card individually, which can also maybe hit the opponent to draw extra cards. Got some more enchantments that can draw 2 and discard with a Dragon Storm. Modern Age will draw and discard over the course of 2 turns. Got the Tainted Indulgence to draw 2 and discard at instant speed. And then at 3 mana, there's a few creatures. Champion of Wits, draw 2, discard 2, can also eternalize it, in which case it gets to draw 4 cards. Kiora can also draw 2, discard 2, maybe make an 8/8 token if it attacks with a full graveyard. There's a Scholar, can also maybe just discard a single flying creature. Winter Night Stories, also happy to discard a creature in order to draw 3, can also harmonize it out of the graveyard. Buried Alive, one of the more powerful cards here, as we can just select whichever creatures we want and put them in the graveyard, setting up Kavaero. There's Emmet, which can discard and draw when it enters or attacks, can also maybe transform it with a full enough graveyard. Kaito, a Planeswalker that lets us loot, can also make an unblockable ninja. Tomebound Lich, when it enters or deals damage, lets us loot, and the 1/3 with Death Touch and Lifelink can also play defense quite well. And then there's the Blue Overlord, fine to impend, also fine to hardcast. And then we move on to our finishers, where we have another sweeper effect with Massacre Worm, great against any token strategies or skewed swarms. There's Hullbreaker Horror, which can bounce stuff when we cast spells, can also bounce something that's on the stack. And that's pretty similar to Tidespout Tyrant, which has been a recent addition to the format as well. The upside of the Tyrant is that it can also bounce lands, but it won't be able to bounce spells that are on the stack. Then we've got the 2 versions of Jingataxius. The Progress Tyrant gets to copy the first artifact, instant, or sorcery we cast, while countering the first for the opponent. We've got the Core Augur, which will draw 7 end of turn, while reducing the opponent's hand size by 7, so they'll often have to discard down to 0 cards in hand. We've got Ancient Brass Dragon, which is excellent if it hits the opponent, as it can help reanimate more things out of our graveyard, as well as the Ancient Silver Dragon, which if it hits the opponent lets us draw a ton of cards, equal to our D20 result. Then we've got Shieldred, another way to reanimate more creatures out of our graveyard at the beginning of our upkeep, while making the opponent sacrifice one of their creatures at the beginning of their upkeep. Toxrill, another excellent way to deal with lots of smaller creatures, as it will slowly shrink them all down at the beginning of each end step, so that's both our end step and the opponent's, giving us some slug tokens in return. We've got Dr. Octopus / Niche, which will, similar to Jingataxius, draws a ton of cards at the beginning of our end step. Then Bringer of the Last Gift is probably the most exciting creature we can reanimate with Kavaero, because of this weird intervening if clause. We did technically cast it with Kavaero, so then we get to enable its ability, where we get to Living Death everything, where we get to swap creatures from the graveyard with those in play, so it will essentially wipe the opponent's board while getting all our creatures back, so that can also be quite devastating. And then we've got Arden as another way to bring back creatures turn after turn, giving them all sorts of abilities, and also synergizes with the other demons in our deck. We've got the Hoarding Broodlord, which can tutor up whatever we want, get to cast it out of exile with Convoke. Gristlebrand, Band and Commander, legal in Brawl, can pay 7 life to draw 7 cards at will. Then a Valgavoth, another powerful demon, even if we just bring it back as a 4/4, still has a lot of applications, punishing the opponent for discarding their cards, get to play them at the cost of some life. And then a Summon Bahamut can destroy multiple things, draw some cards, maybe end the game with the Mega Flare. There's Triplicate's Titan. Even if we bring it back as a 4/4, when it dies, it will still leave behind those 3/3 tokens. And then we already mentioned the Core Augur. And then finally we have a few more reanimation effects. The classic Reanimate at 1 mana at the cost of some life. We've got Persist, only brings back non-legendary creatures, still plenty of those around. Necromancy, another recent addition to the format. A lot of text, but basically just a 3 mana enchantment that brings back a creature. If they deal with the enchantment, the creature also goes away. And then there's Victimize, need to sacrifice a creature as an additional cost, but we get to reanimate 2 creatures at once. And then Zombify, another classic at 4 mana. And then finally Brainstorm can also improve our hands, especially when paired with fetch lands if we time it correctly. And then Ponder can do something very similar. And then Mana Base has a couple channel lands. Takenuma can also maybe fill the graveyard for us. We've got Ancient Tomb, which can also be very powerful. The Sanitarium can also function as a discard outlet. And then that's pretty much it. Urborg can also maybe turn our fetch lands into swamps, so we don't need to take more damage. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Old Rutstein, black-green, kind of a graveyard deck as well. Our hand has discard outlets, big creatures, So that's a good combo, although only 2 lanes and no early interaction or way to really guarantee a 3rd lane. Although we do of course get a few draw steps in the meantime. This hand's okay. None of these creatures are necessarily game-ending in this matchup. They might get destroyed before they get to trigger. So I think we can do better. This is a slight improvement. Still only have the 1 finisher, which may not be good enough. But at least I've got some more interaction here. Wash Away is not going to work with Halfling making Rutstein uncounterable. So I'm probably going to end up surveilling. Eventually Deluge can catch us back up. And then we've got a few discard outlets, even one at instant speed here with 3 steps ahead. Modern Age, I could keep as something I can cast right now. Slimefoot, whenever Swamp or Forest enters, gets to draft a card. That's okay. So they get a treasure and a blood token in the meantime. Wouldn't mind seeing an extra creature for us to remove with a Deluge. We get to untap. And then what do I want to discard? Could be the Champion of Wits, can later eternalize it. And we have other ways to draw and discard. So I'm not opposed to casting the Deluge here. We'll set them back a bit. And then next turn, if I wanted to, we can Kavaero for Tidespout Tyrant, or I can wait to immediately cast a spell to maybe bounce something. This can also bounce lands, by the way, so that's the upside over Hullbreaker Horror. Of course, a much older card. Alright, Rex Age, blow up Modern Age is fine. And a Skull Prophet. Okay, so what are we thinking here? Just chart a course, keep up Wash Away if they replay Rutstein. Seems alright. Alright, well, we found some more goodies to discard here. Bringer would of course bring back some of the opponent's stuff. There's Arden, which is also quite good. Still probably prioritize Bringer in the graveyard. And then pass. Could still decide to wait on Kavaero. So if I were to counter Rutstein, they might let it go to the graveyard if they know about Bringer. But then I can just go for some different play if I really wanted to. Opponent will send it back to the command zone. So not opposed to going for Bringer. Or I can pass, and then I can both counter and draw and discard, setting up Arden as well. Not that Arden's all that great with an empty graveyard after we Bringer, but we'll see. Butler would mill more cards, which would make my Bringer a little worse. Either way, they can already mill 2 with a Prophet. So tricky spots. I guess I could counter, draw, discard. And then Volgavoth would be good too. Probably better than Arden at this point. Although Arden would give Volgavoth haste as well as, let's see, is this a demon? It is. Yeah, you know what, maybe Arden is still better actually, just giving my team haste and lifelink. Because all those bringers get to attack right away. And then I'll have Floodmaw up to trigger Tidespout Tyrant. But yeah, opponent does get to maybe mill 2, adding more creatures to the graveyard. World Shaper. So that can get a land back, but yeah, that's fine. So let's go ahead and bring her. Then I can still play the Signets. Opponent does get a few triggers here. We'll fetch and get a land. I guess I only get to bounce one thing since a Signet cannot cast into the Floodmaw right away. But that's fine, we'll just bounce maybe the Halfling or land. Let's go with the land. And then I can reanimate the opponent's stuff too, forgot about that. Does Reclamation Sage blow anything up? It doesn't. World Shaper it is. Alright, and these get to attack. Milled Bahamut and Shieldred, so those are pretty nice too. Arden can get those back next turn. And we're close to just hardcasting Volgavoth as well. So, don't have to destroy the Butler if we're worried about it getting anything back. Only returns creatures, however. Yeah, this is fine. Alright, let's see if our opponents got their own board wipe. Very much possible. Hive, a little slow to exile our graveyard. Blood on the Snow was to be expected, so they did have the board wipe after all. That's alright. So back to the command zone, and yeah, the Bringer never got exiled, so we can just make that same play again. So yeah, let's go for it. Anything I want to do beforehand? I don't think I have the mana to do much else. 3, 4, 5, 6, so can't Eternalize Champion of Wits first to maybe fill the graveyard some more. But yeah, this is still probably the move. Bahamut gets to blow something up. And we can discard to maybe set up our next reanimation. Also could keep something in hand here to hardcast, but yeah, our opponent has seen enough. Could cast Kiora, could cast Floodmaw, triggering our Tidespout Tyrant twice, maybe bouncing some lands back, and then once again we have a bunch of hasty, life-linking demons getting in, so our opponent's pretty close to dead here as well. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Goben / Fleem, so Mayhem deck. Our hand has most of the pieces we need, except for maybe a discard outlet, although I can use Brainstorm to try and find it. So I'll keep. And then I think the sequencing is turn 1 island, that way I can also Brainstorm kind of defensively for opponents, fires off a discard spell, so we can hide some key cards on the top of our deck. Otherwise I'm just going to take my draw step, Brainstorm, shuffle, get a black source, and then I can still duress. So we found our discard outlet. Buried Alive could also be very powerful here. Since I don't think Toxrill is going to be necessarily all that impactful, our opponent's not really an all-out creature deck, so can maybe get rid of Toxrill, and then Buried Alive can find whatever finisher we need. But I'll still hang on to Jin-Gitaxias. So something along these lines. Get Watery Grave, so I can duress. Could also Surveil, to be honest, and then next turn go Dragonstorm plus duress. But on the off chance that our opponent is holding something scary, we can duress right now. Alright, opponent had a Reanimate, which, yeah, could be quite devastating if we discarded something expensive. Then a Signet. So yeah, let's take the Reanimate. So we don't need to worry about our opponent sniping our finisher. And then Psychic Frog also a discard outlet. So yeah, we should be fine to Buried Alive here. Select our most powerful creatures. Could go for Arden plus something else that we immediately get to bring back. Such as maybe a hasty Silver Dragon to draw a million cards. And then could also go for Bringer as something we can select with Kavaero, but we could go for something else, like maybe a Jingataxius. Shieldred was also a consideration as a way to get more creatures back afterwards. But yeah, as far as we know, the coast is clear for Kavaero into Arden, which in turn gets back the Silver Dragon. Opponent can't jump because of Menace. We get to roll a d20 and draw 13 cards. Yeah, that's pretty good. No maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And then we've got more ways to discard creatures from our hand with Bone Shards. There's a Sanitarium. It's kinda difficult to organize my hand when holding this many cards. Got Persist to reanimate something. Bit of interaction with Floodmaw. Couple ramp cards. Alright, now paying attention to what our opponent is doing. I've got a Dragon Engine and a Psychic Frog. So they do get to go off with Fleem here, casting some of their spells at a discount. A 1-mana Robbery. They can fetch, maybe still cast the Schemes. Opponent discarding Ashling, which they can cast. But that's going to be their last play for now. Okay, so where are we at? I can keep attacking with my dragon. If they give Psychic Frog flying, I can take it out with one of my removal spells at instant speed. Do I want to discard anything else, or are we fine with Jingataxius? I guess we're fine with Jingataxius. Opponent's at 18, anyway I can win the game right now. Probably not. Valgavoth would also be good to counteract some of their Mayhem synergies. So maybe I do want to discard Valgavoth here. So discard a card, take out probably just Fleem. And then go to attackers. And get back Valgavoth. And yeah, our opponent has seen enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a powerful hand facing Wrenn and Six. So our opponent's going to be looking for Strip Mine and then repeatedly destroying our lanes. We are on the draw, so won't be able to counter Wrenn. But we do have Dark Ritual, plus a discard outlet and something to reanimate. So maybe we can set up a quick Hullbreaker Horror, which can then still take over. This is a matchup where having fetch lands can be useful, since we can play the fetch lands, which our opponent's not going to want to strip mine. Strike Rich. Yeah, I think we play a land out, could make it Otawara, save the command tower, which is maybe a bit more valuable. And I do want to maybe have double blue up for counterspell next turn. Alright, Dryad. Still one extra land drop remains. Do you have a strip mine in hand already? You do not. Okay, so I get to keep up counterspell. Or I could play Modern Age with a plan of next turn going Ritual, Kavaero, get back Hullbreaker. And then I guess I would still have a leftover mana to trigger Hullbreaker with a Ponder. So that's also quite tempting. So I do think we play the Modern Age over Chart Course. And then hope we don't get strip mined. If we do, I can still ritual out Kavaero, just won't have the extra mana for Ponder. It's going to be a Nantuko, making extra copies of the Dryad or just a bunch of 1/1s. So those are good targets for Hullbreaker to bounce. Alright, opponent's down to 1 card in hand at least. Find a mana drain, so a land can go here. Get a 4/4 Hullbreaker, Ponder, and then do I bounce the Dryad that's enchanted so they can make more copies, or do we just bounce the 2/4 copy to begin with? Probably the Dryad that's enchanted. So now they only get to make 1/1s. And then do we want to shuffle? Bitter Triumph would be an okay draw. I have a bunch of counter spells already. Yeah, I think this is a shuffle. And draw Deluge, perfect. So Deluge can take care of Nantuko and all the tokens. And then maybe we can leverage our Hullbreaker with a couple counter spells. Alright, Hugs is scary. And those are some good cards in exile as well, although we will be able to counter those. So, don't really want to attack, could still chart a course. And then trigger Kavaero, bounce the Dryad token. Don't really want to bounce Hugs. Sure. I mean, I guess we could bounce Hugs and then counter it on the way down. Just so we start clearing a path for an attack. But I can do that next turn. Bitter Triumph, also decent. And then, what do we get rid of? Could be the Winter Night story, since I can always harmonize it. Okay, and then for now, pass a turn. Nantuko makes a 1/1. They do have enough mana to cast a Star of Extinction. Gonna be a Dryad instead, plus maybe Roxanne. Nope, opponent goes for Fable. So, yeah, those exiled cards are going to waste now. Still wouldn't mind countering the Fable. I'll just use Counterspell, leave mana drain for later, since I don't really need the extra mana next turn. And then now I get to bounce Hugs if I'd like. And then we can counter it with mana drain perhaps. Alright, so we have options. Don't really want to Deluge without leaving mana drain up. So could try Kiora, hope to draw into a land, although that's a little risky. So I think we just hit for 2 and pass. And then we've got options available. Alright, Hugs X equals 3, good target for mana drain. And yeah, opponent's gonna scoop it up here, get to trigger Hullbreaker, bounce something else. And next turn with all the extra mana we can deploy Kiora, maybe harmonize Winter Night Stories, while still maybe keeping up a counterspell for their next turn. Being able to Bitter Triumph at instant speed essentially gives us a Remand-like counterspell where we can bounce a spell that's on the stack. So in the meantime, we should be able to take over. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Rocco, so Naya Exile. Our hand has a discard outlet, something big, persists, cannot reanimate Toxrill, but might be able to reanimate other stuff. So yeah, this hand's okay. Toxrill could be okay in the matchup, maybe not game-ending. So ideally we find some other big creature to discard and reanimate. Opponent off to a quick start with a Chromox on the play. So we'll have some catching up to do. Just gonna surveil end of turn, and then turn 2 maybe start with a Brutality. Wouldn't be able to deal with Rocco. And then Emmet, I don't really need here. Could have also let the Rocco trigger resolve first, in case we wanted to keep something on top that we didn't want exiled. Now Ghostly Pilfer is interesting. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, we get to draw a card, so that also counts anything they play from exile. So yeah, that could be worth casting here, even though they get to trigger Rocco once. And then now we also have a way to discard at will. It's gonna be a Kami. That we can maybe remove with a Brutality. Although I guess the Kami immediately picks up 2 counters here from its own ability. So yeah, wouldn't be able to take it out with Brutalities -2 anymore. And the counters are gonna add up quickly. Opponent found out the Fairy's Protection. We found a Reanimate. So I can immediately bring back Toxrill here with Reanimate. Yeah, that's probably the best play I have. And then I could also use my Collective Brutality just to check out their hand, I suppose. This happens at the beginning of each end step, so I guess never mind. With the Brutality, I can finish off the Kami thanks to Toxrill. Do we want to discard anything else? Not particularly. I don't think our opponent's going to be holding many instants and sorceries, but maybe it's still worth a try. Could actually also gain life since we're at 14 from that Reanimate. So we'll go all modes. Discarding at this point. Maybe Zombify and Persists. Or maybe I don't need lands. 5. Alright, they did have a safekeeping. And then now Toxrill triggers. Kami's gone. And the board looks a little bit more manageable. So then next turn we want to keep digging with the Winter Night Stories. Found Bitter Triumph that can answer Rocco. Does avoid the -1 counter this way. Okay, so I guess we keep a Bitter Triumph now, but yeah, opponent has seen enough already. Toxrill's just gonna take over. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Bristly Bill, mono green counters. Can be pretty fast out of the gates. Our hand is reasonable, just missing something big to reanimate and maybe a couple of lands. But with all these draw discard effects, we should be able to find those. The rest, not guaranteed to hit, but they might have some enchantments that augment their +1 counters that we can take. And we see Case of the Locked Hothouse for extra lanes, and Pick Your Poison could also answer a large flyer, perhaps. Although right now doesn't seem like a threat, so I'll take the Case. Can be dangerous with those landfall creatures. So, could already Bitter Triumph, but there's nothing I actively want to discard, so I would just be paying 3 life. Could also wait to maybe take out the Kami, which is pretty good in combination with Bill. And then for now just go for a Dragon Storm. Discard the Tyrant. So now we have something worthwhile to reanimate. Although it is a flyer, so they can answer it with Pick Your Poison. Opponent plays a Halfling. And they're actually going to make me sacrifice an enchantment. Well, that was lucky. Now we found Bringer, that's even better. So I guess we can just set that up instead. Kaito can discard. Could also Bitter Triumph. Don't think we're in danger of dying next turn. So yeah, maybe Kaito lets them overextend. So then I don't even have to discard Bringer now. Can save it for next turn, so we hide a bit of info. Since Kaito is gonna phase out. Discard Niche, perfect. Alright, we've got our opponent right where we want him. Opponent's gonna attack. And now we will discard the real payoff.
Thanks. I'll be taking that.
Just like in Standard. Get back our Bringer. First get the Bringer back, so it's no longer in the graveyard for Kavaero to exile it. And draw a few more cards. Now whenever we cast a spell we get to bounce something. So yeah, there's no way the green counters deck can recover from this. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Rakdos, the Muscle. And what do we think of our hand? It seems reasonable. Psychic Frog can discard Volgavoth. Kavaero can get it back, have a mana drain and drown in the meantime. Can start with Sewers to surveil, maybe mill some expensive creature into the graveyard. The Mirror Signet. Not a card I necessarily need here. Although wouldn't have been a terrible draw. Opponent with Magda. So I can already play Psychic Frog, just to have a blocker. Seems a bit early to keep up mana drain. So our opponent missing black mana at the moment, plays another Magda. Okay. Pumps additional dwarves, so yeah. I would now have to discard 2 cards. Alright, we'll discard Volgavoth. So Drown says, destroy creature with mana value less than or equal number of cards in graveyard. So that's currently 1, so I can't actually drown anything. But I can keep a mana drain. And then next turn, go for Kavaero. Opponent gets 2 more treasures, 1 for each dwarf. So yeah, this double Magda start was actually quite impressive. But we do have a nice answer lined up. So with 5 extra mana, I can both Kavaero And then still have 5 mana left. So could go for a Champion of Wits. Or maybe Kaito. I guess Champion's fine. Alright, could also discard Nietzsche alongside. Probably don't need Kaito anymore. And then just play Kavaero in the form of, I want to say, Nietzsche over Valgavoth. So we immediately get to draw. Opponent left Rakdos in the graveyard, so maybe they have a way to get it back. Bedevil my Kavaero, make another treasure. Back to the command zone seems fine. We have other ways to reanimate our creatures. So now I should be able to finally trade with Magda. Shieldred would also be nice to get back. So with 5 mana, could, let's see, Victimize does require a creature in play, so could go Pilfer, discard Shieldreds, and then Victimize, get back Shieldreds and Valgavoth. And that'll do it. Opponent has to sack a creature to Shieldreds, and then next turn we get to potentially reanimate more stuff, rinse and repeat, and then before you know it, Buried Alive can also search up some fun creatures to reanimate with Shieldred, and that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that seems pretty good. We can cure out discard Hullbreaker, ponder to maybe look for more answers. Opponent on a Sliver deck. Sliver's having Warp 3. So, a matchup where I expect a lot of creatures. Hullbreaker can bounce them. For now, not in a hurry to ponder turn 1. Can maybe fetch a Surveil land. Ponder does get better with fetch lands, but currently don't have another blue source. So get Sewers. And then Brutality against the Slivers. May not be all that great, since they're mostly creatures. -2 could maybe take out a smaller creature to begin with. Yeah, I'm gonna decline. Don't expect many instants and sorceries for me to take. So now I can ponder. And then these are all quite promising. So I can draw into the Silver Dragon, which is maybe the preferred creature to discard. I wouldn't be able to cast a Blue Overlord since I only have single blue, but we'll have Kiora to help out. So I'm not going to shuffle. And then, yeah, if we can connect with the Ancient Silver Dragon, we can take over. So that might be preferable over Hullbreaker. Opponent ramps with Explore. See a lot of Signets as well. Found another blue source. So discard Silver Dragon and probably still Hullbreaker over the Triplicate Titan. Titan could be better if we expect a Sweeper, as it'll leave us with a bunch of 3/3s. Opponent ramps with Key to the Archive. Could maybe give them access to a Day of Judgments. Or maybe some other removal spell that can take out the Silver Dragon before we get to connect. And they did discard a Sliver. Now Bringer of the Last Gift is probably worth discarding before we set up Kavaero. So let's see, if I Overlord, we discard 1 card, so I'm still going to be a little short of enabling Kiora. But we can try. Maybe I draw into a 1 mana discard spell. I do not, but we'll still discard the bringer. So one more fetch land would have made an 8/8 token here. But yeah, then next turn Kavaero could get back bringer, which in turn gets back everything else. But maybe we can wait for the opponent to put some more creatures on the battlefield. So the Weftwinder is in play. Conjuring slivers at random. Persist can also get something back, although Persist is not going to trigger the bringer, because that only happens on cast. So how patient do we want to be? Can maybe go Modern Age. Enabling Kiora. Discard Titan. Attack. Make our 8/8. And then I could persist something now. Or I could wait to try and set up our bringer. So we just want him to play as many creatures as possible. Ooh, Dark Ritual. So they're going big. Starting with Tempered Sliver. Into Predatory. So far so good. Scuttling Sliver. And a Talisman, so opponent's pretty much tapped out. Even drew Mana Drain. So we should be alright. Could attack first, although maybe if they chump they'll get that creature back, so that's not worth it. Select Bringer. Welcome back everyone. And we still have Mana Drain up, just in case. And our opponent has seen enough. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Tifa, an incredibly scary commander. We do have multiple counterspells to deal with it. The rest of my hand's not particularly good, but maybe I can keep just based on Wash Away and Counterspell, pitch one creature to Chromox. Although I could maybe wait. Depends whether or not we want to keep up Counterspell on turn 1, but that may not be necessary. I guess if our opponent has their own Chromox, I do get punished, because they could play Tifa on turn 1. Just a Birds of Paradise. Dark Ritual. So don't need to Chromox yet. Just hoping to draw a discard outlet here. There we go. So if I were to Chromox pitch a creature, then Pilfer can discard the other, and I'll still have Wash Away up at the very least. Let's see, can I actually just bring back something right now with the Dark Ritual as well? I'll go for Jin-Gitaxias. So I can Pilfer, Ritual. I guess I'll be one short of playing Kavaero. That's alright, we can wait. But yeah, if we had an extra land, we would have been able to. Let's try and counter that one after we draw. That works. And a land allows me to maybe keep up Counterspell here. Alright, opponent doesn't want to see what we're about to bring back. But yeah, we can get back Jin-Gitaxias, keep up Counterspell. At the beginning of our end step, draw 7. Opponent's hand size reduced by 7, so they get one turn to cast something, then their hand goes away. And they're going to have a hard time recovering from that, especially with Bitter Triumph as another answer for Tifa. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a pretty decent setup. We have our discard outlet, something to reanimate, and a bit of ramp could also come in handy. Facing Nicol Bolas, so Grix's mid-range. Could definitely have some disruption in the form of discard spells or counter spells. While their opponent casting Bolas could also function as a discard outlet. So if they have a discard spell, they could try and take away the Dragonstorm, but then eventually if they cast Nicol Bolas, we'll still be able to put Bahamut in the graveyard. So then countering our commander is probably their best approach. So then having the extra ramp from Talisman can make it easier to cast Kavaero for 6 mana. But we'll see how the game progresses. For now, opponent does have the Thoughtseize, as we suspected. So we'll see what they take. Could go for Talisman, then we just play Dragonstorm. Okay. And a Bojuka Bog, so they actually had Graveyard Hate, but they were maybe forced to run it out early. Could have maybe kept my island to hide a bit of info. And could go for Broodlord first, because there's probably not going to be much worth destroying early in the game. Whereas I can use the Broodlord to tutor up whatever I want. Alright, now we get to double spell Signet into the Modern Age. And then Bringer of the Last Gift isn't bad either. Can set up that combo. Although next turn I get to discard again. So yeah, if they don't have a counter spell, we'll be getting 3 enormous creatures back on turn 4. They maybe wasted their chance at exiling my graveyard with Bojuka Bog. And yeah, there's Nicol Bolas. So can use that to discard Bahamut. And let's go for it. Bringer of the Last Gifts. Wipe the board, get everything back. And because we get the Bringer back before the ability resolves to exile Bringer from my graveyard, we get to have both. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing off against Obosh. So this is not a companion, so they're allowed to play evenly costed cards as well. Our hand has discard outlet, reanimation targets, so we're good to go. Tidespout Tyrant may not be game over if we get it back. A red-black is going to have some removal for it too. But yeah, turn 2 with Chromox we can already get one of these in play. If our opponent doesn't play a creature, maybe getting Kaito going is worth it, since they're not going to be pressuring my Planeswalker too much. We do see Burn Down the House, so they might be a more controlling build. Either way, I'm down to play my Planeswalker. Discard Tidespout Tyrant. And then the Blue Overlord can give us some more plays on the turn after we reanimate. Alright, so could start by drawing. Maybe we discard something more powerful than a Tidespout Tyrant here.
Now this is a juicy secret.
Keep my fetch land for potential synergies like Brainstorm. And I don't expect my Tidespout Tyrant to necessarily survive, but I'm still gonna go for it. Ooh, Rakdos Charm in response, exiling my graveyard. Yeah, that's the perfect counterplay. Could have also blown up my Chromox, but our opponent was being patient. That being said, we still have a Planeswalker and a 4/4, so it's not the end of the world. So Kavaero can attack. Now Kaito just draws. And we can play the Overlord. Do I keep Takenuma? I don't think I do. Could have also checked out their hand first with the Brutality to maybe better protect Kaito. Since we are getting close to an ultimate. Villainous Wrath wipes my board. So back to the command zone. And now a Triplicate Titan we wouldn't mind discarding with Kaito. And then we can get it right back here.
Now, what do we have here?
And our opponent's gonna scoop it up, get a 4/4 version of the Titan, but if it does get destroyed, we'll get all those 3/3 tokens. And next turn we can also ultimate Kaito, and with this emblem it's gonna be pretty easy to take over. Alright, so we get to see this superior Spiderman / Kavaero reanimator deck in action. And yeah, this is one of the most powerful commanders I've played in recent memory. Pretty easy to build around it. You just have your reanimation effect in the command zone, so then you don't need to worry about having a ton of reanimation spells in the deck, leaving a lot of room for interaction, discard outlets, and payoff cards. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.